I don't think I need to summarize it because the submission was so short. What is my hardware chain and what's my post-processing chain? Look, I summarized it anyway. I can't help myself. I want to share my philosophy with post-processing a little bit. This is something that I've been planning on doing for a while on Podcastage, so do not be surprised if you see this week or next week. This is something that I wanted to do ever since I tried to make a video, how to process your podcast, and realized, oh, nobody wants to do this because it sounds almost identical to the original file. And nobody's going to say, I want to spend a bunch of money getting stuff to make my audio sound exactly the same. Let me share my philosophy. First thing I want to point out is the best way to get a good sounding final product is to get the audio sounding as good as you possibly can in the room prior to hitting record. You can use plugins to fix terrible audio, but it will always degrade the audio. You want the best sounding audio prior to hitting record. You should be 95% of the way to the final product prior to hitting record. Then, as far as my philosophy on post-processing or the purpose of post-processing, at least for spoken word, it's not to make you sound like James Earl Jones. It's not to make you sound like a radio broadcaster. It's to serve a purpose, and that purpose is make listening to your audio as easy as it can possibly be for your audience. If I can summarize that down a little bit, make your audio easy to listen to. That's the purpose of post-processing for spoken word, in my opinion. With that being said, I did record a couple of samples. I am going to jump to that right now, and I will walk you through the hardware chain and the post-processing chain. But right now, I'm just using the XM8500, running directly into the M-Audio M-Track Solo into my computer. That's the hardware chain. The audio treatment in my room plays a big part. Shutting off loud sound sources plays a big part. Making sure I have fairly decent microphone technique plays a good part. Let's jump to past Bandrew. Okay, for this example, I am using the Shure SM7B. I'm about 4 fingers away from the end of the microphone, and I am running this directly into the Universal Audio X8. My gain is set at 55 dB, so a little bit hotter than I usually use, which is why I clipped on a recent podcast where I was a guest on. I realized I set my gain a bit too hot. But this is the raw, unprocessed audio. The key to good sounding audio in the final product is to make sure the audio is as good as it can possibly be before you hit record. And that's where I am at. Quiet space, treated space, limited background noise, good gain levels, and we're off to the races. If I could snap, I would snap right now because now all of my processing is engaged. I'm using the same microphone, SM7B, same distance, same gain settings, same interface, but the plugins that I'm using, RX7D Reverb, which does very, very little because I have a very dead room. It just takes off a slight edge. Deplosive, not a very sensitive plugin. I do very little there just to capture any plosives that I may have missed. RX7 Breath Control or D-Breath. I am not removing them completely. I am attenuating the breaths by about 6 to 10 dB. So when I breathe in, you can still hear it. It doesn't sound robotic. I use RX7 Mouth Declick to get rid of the disgusting clicks. You could still hear it because it's not going to remove the most egregious examples of it. Then I use FabFilter Pro G, which is a gate from FabFilter, but I run it in expansion. So I am not removing the noise floor completely. I'm just attenuating it ever so slightly to make it a more natural and clean sounding recording. Then I use FabFilter Pro Q3. In that EQ, I'm not altering the microphone sound at all. I am only doing a 50 hertz high pass filter. Then I use the Universal Audio LA2A compressor Silver, and I get 3 to 5 dB of gain reduction there. And the final plugin on the channel strip is FabFilter Pro DS. Yes, even on the SM7B, to capture any kind of really sharp S sounds. And then on the master channel, I have the Universal Audio SSL G bus compressor, and I'll get half a dB to 1 dB of compression there just to make it a little bit more glued together with that and the outro music or the intro music for the audio podcast. But I will have leveled both of these. Let me go ahead and switch to the non-audio treated, the non-post-processed to the post-processed a couple of times. They will both be level matched to -16 LUFS, so the only difference will be the processing. All right, now you are listening to the unprocessed audio leveled to -16 LUFS, and now you're listening to the processed audio leveled to -16 LUFS. There's not a massive difference. Again, we are on the unprocessed audio one final time so you can hear it. And now we are on the processed audio to let you hear it one final time. And there you go. That is how I process my podcast. I know we didn't go too into depth into every single plugin, but it gives you a very top level look at how I approach things. I did try to do that really in-depth look at my plugins a couple of months ago. I recorded an entire podcastage video, and then I realized I can't publish this because I had not found an angle. And the reason I came to that conclusion, the introduction was supposed to be, here's a video on how to make your audio go from this to this. And it's supposed to be, hey, it sounds like garbage right now. And then when I say to this, it's supposed to sound amazing. And I realized after I spent hours and hours and hours filming and editing, they sound almost identical. Nobody's going to watch a 20-minute video to get audio that sounds the same. And the reason I couldn't publish it is I didn't have an angle. I didn't understand how to spin it in a way to make it accessible. And I finally did after sitting on it for months, and that is my philosophy or the purpose of post-processing. And it is to get your audio as listenable as possible for the audience. That means making sure it's not overly sibilant, making sure there's not annoying mouth clicks, making sure there's no stray plosives, making sure there's not too much reverb, whatever it is. All the stuff that I do. So that is the approach that I came up with. It's how I've been approaching my post-processing for a long time. If I don't like the sound of a microphone, I'm not going to use it. I'm going to use something different. I'm not going to dislike my voice to the point of trying to alter it with EQ. I'm not going to use voice changers to sound different. My voice is my voice. The microphone that I'm using is the microphone that I'm using. Unless the mic is painful to listen to or just awful sounding, I'm not going to try to alter the sound of it too much. Most of the time, it will just be a high pass filter. If there's something really egregious, then I'll do a bit more EQ. But I'm rambling at this point. I don't have anything else to say on that. I will have a full video on Podcastage talking about that in the next week or two.